Have you ever wondered if the fans really have the power to sink a Star Wars series, or if Disney just doesn't want to look in the mirror and admit that sometimes, just sometimes, things don't turn out the way they hoped? Today we're diving headfirst into the chaos of The Acolyte, a series that arrived with fanfare and promises of revolutionizing a galaxy far, far away, but ended up crashing like a pilotless TIE fighter. This isn't just a story of cold numbers or harsh reviews. There are juicy rumors, fiery accusations, and a furious wife who decided to point the finger at everyone except those behind the curtain. So grab your lightsaber, get comfortable, and buckle up for a ride full of unexpected twists, because this tale has more drama than an Anakin and Obi-Wan showdown on Mustafar. Think about this for a second. Star Wars isn't just a franchise. It's a cultural phenomenon that's survived generations, fan wars, and even Disney's multi-billion-dollar acquisition. But when The Acolyte hit the scene in 2024, something felt different. It wasn't just another space adventure with Jedi and Sith. It came with a bold promise to explore new ground. The High Republic, a golden era we'd only glimpsed in books and comics until now. Yet, instead of uniting fans, it ended up dividing them like never before. What happened? Was it a brave experiment that crashed under its own ambition, or did it fall victim to a perfect storm of impossible expectations and questionable decisions? We're going to break it all down, from the millions Disney poured into the project to the public meltdown that left everyone stunned. This isn't just an analysis, it's an autopsy of a galactic dream that never quite took off. Let's start where it hurts. The money. Imagine you've got $250 million in your hands, $250 million to be exact, and you decide to sink it all into an 8-episode series. That's over $30 million per episode, a figure that makes even Hollywood's biggest productions blink. Disney didn't skimp on The Acolyte, real sets instead of green screens, puppets for the aliens, practical effects that felt ripped from the original trilogy. They wanted it to feel authentic, to breathe Star Wars through every pore. But here's the catch. When you spend that much, you expect equally big results. And The Acolyte didn't deliver. Let's do a quick math check to put it in perspective. The series racked up 2.7 billion minutes watched on Disney Plus in 2024, according to Luminate. Data. Sounds impressive, right? Now consider that the total runtime of its 8 episodes is about 330 minutes. Divide those 2.7 billion by 330, and you get an estimated 8 million full views. 8 million for a franchise like Star Wars, which has packed theaters and dominated pop culture for decades. That's a bucket of cold water. Compare that to The Mandalorian, which tripled those numbers in its first season without breaking a sweat, and you realize something's off. Disney bet big, but the fans didn't show up like they'd hoped, and that $250 million investment started looking like a financial black hole with no escape. But it wasn't all waste, or at least that's what they tried to sell us. Behind the scenes, footage showcased jaw-dropping sets, a Jedi temple built from scratch, not computer-generated. Actors like Carrie-Anne Moss and Lee Jung-jae raved about the experience, how they could touch and feel the world instead of imagining it against a blue screen. The problem? All that effort didn't translate on-screen the way fans expected. The production was expensive, sure, but it also felt disconnected from what makes Star Wars special to so many. And while Disney execs were counting the zeros in their budgets, something else started catching fire behind the scenes. Let's talk about Leslie Headland, the showrunner who took the reins of The Acolyte. Before this, she was known for Russian Doll, a Netflix gem blending dark comedy with time loops. She wasn't a rookie, and Disney clearly saw her as someone with a fresh voice for Star Wars. But from day one, Headland made it clear she wasn't playing it safe. In interviews, she called The Acolyte the gayest Star Wars ever made, a line that raised eyebrows and sparked debates before we even saw a trailer. What did she mean? Well, the series gave us a coven of lesbian witches who used the Force to create twins without fathers, a bold move some praised for its originality, while others saw it as a weird detour from the saga's essence. The plot unfolds in the High Republic, about 100 years before the Phantom Menace. It's an era of peace where the Jedi are at their peak, and the galaxy feels like a brighter place. But Headland didn't just want to show heroic Jedi. She wanted to explore the dark corners, the fringes of the Force. So she introduced us to May and Osha, twins played by Amandla Stenberg, one raised by the witches, the other by the Jedi. And then there's Chimir, the mysterious Sith played by Manny Jacinto, who stole every scene he was in. The idea was ambitious, a story of intrigue, betrayal, and power, all wrapped in a Star Wars aesthetic with a modern twist. The trouble came when fans started talking on X and in forums. The mockery didn't take long. Lesbian space witches, woke Star Wars, Disney ruined it again. It didn't help that Episode 3, which revealed the twins' origin, was received more like a sermon than an adventure. Hedlund came out swinging in The Hollywood Reporter, saying it was reductive to label her series as queer, though in the same breath, she took pride in being a gay woman leading such a massive project. So, was it a brave experiment or a forced agenda? Depends on who you ask. But one thing's certain, while fans argued online, someone behind the scenes decided it was time to fight back. Fast forward to August 19th, 2024, the day Disney announced The Acolyte wouldn't get a second season. For many, it wasn't a shock. Reviews had been mixed, the numbers weren't stellar, and the social media conversation was hotter than a Tatooine afternoon. While some fans cheered and others mourned the loss of a series with potential, one person refused to stay quiet. That person was Rebecca Henderson, an actress in the series as Jedi Vernestra and, more importantly, Leslie Headland's wife. Henderson took to Instagram like it was a battlefield. In a sarcasm-laden post, she wrote, "So The Acolyte had 2.7 billion minutes watched, was the second most watched show on Disney Plus in 2024. Tell me again it was canceled because no one watched it, and not because of, that." The message was clear. To her, the cancellation had nothing to do with the show's performance and everything to do with some nebulous conspiracy. What did she mean by, that? She didn't spell it out, but the subtext pointed to the fans, the YouTubers, and what she saw as a hate campaign against the show. The meltdown didn't stop there. Henderson kept replying to comments, defending the series and her wife with a passion bordering on desperation. To some, it was a human moment, an artist standing up for her work. To others, it was a clumsy attempt to rewrite the narrative and blame the audience instead of looking inward. But while she fired off posts online, fans and critics started doing their own math. And what they found painted a very different picture from the one Henderson was trying to sell. Let's put those 2.7 billion minutes under the microscope, because numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story without context either. As I mentioned, dividing those minutes by the series' 330-minute runtime gives you about 8 million full views. For an average streaming show, that wouldn't be bad, but this is Star Wars, a franchise that set an insanely high bar. Compare those 8 million to The Mandalorian, which racked up over 12 billion minutes in a fraction of the time in its 2019 debut. And the gap is glaring. Then there's Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which took the top spot on Disney Plus in 2024 with over 3 billion minutes watched. Here's a wild stat. Percy Jackson didn't even count its first few weeks in that total because it premiered in late 2023. Adjust for that, and it likely outpaced The Acolyte by an even wider margin. And don't forget Andor, which, while not pulling Mandalorian-level numbers, held a loyal audience and stellar reviews with a far more reasonable budget. The Acolyte, with its $250 million price tag, didn't just need to be good, it needed to be a viewership juggernaut to justify that investment. It wasn't. But there's more. Luminate data also shows the series started strong. The first 2 episodes drew millions, but then the audience plummeted. The finale, which should have been an epic climax, marked the lowest viewership for a Star Wars finale on Disney+. Why? Some blame negative word of mouth. Others point to episodes like the third, which left fans scratching their heads. Whatever the reason, those 2.7 billion minutes aren't a trophy. They're a sign something went wrong along the way. And while Henderson kept fighting on Instagram, Disney was already looking at the ledger and making calls. Now, we step into executive territory, where emotions give way to cold, hard numbers. In November 2024, Alan Bergman, co-chair of Disney Entertainment, broke the silence on the cancellation in an interview. His words were blunt. "We were happy with The Acolyte's performance, but it wasn't where we needed it to be given the cost structure." Translation, the series wasn't a total flop, but with $250 million on the line, not bad isn't good enough. Disney didn't want a decent show. They wanted a runaway hit that paid the bills, and then some. This wasn't a personal attack on Hedlund or her vision. It was a pure business decision. Star Wars in the Disney era has been a money-making machine, but also a minefield. Films like The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker split fans and series. Like the Book of Boba Fett left many with a sour taste. The Acolyte landed at a time when the franchise needed a surefire win, not a risky experiment. And though it had its defenders, critics gave it a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes compared to the audience's 19%, the word of mouth wasn't strong enough to keep it afloat. Disney isn't a charity. It's a corporation answering to shareholders. When Bergman talked about cost structure, he meant every dollar spent has to yield profit, not just break even. The Acolyte didn't, and the axe fell. But while the execs closed the chapter, some on the team refused to accept reality. And that brings us to the next twist. Here's where the story gets messy. Instead of admitting the Acolyte didn't connect like they'd hoped, Henderson and others on the team started spinning an alternative narrative. The series didn't fail because of its quality. It failed because of the fans. In her Instagram meltdown, Henderson dropped that cryptic line, not because of, that, which many took as an accusation of racism, sexism, or blind hate toward the show's diversity. She wasn't alone. Amanda Stenberg, the lead, spoke out on social media about the vitriol she faced, hinting the backlash had darker roots than just script critiques. There was some truth to that, of course. Star Wars has a vocal minority of toxic fans who attack anything that doesn't fit their nostalgic vision of the saga. Actors like Kelly Marie Tran and John Boyega have lived that hate firsthand. But with The Acolyte, the loudest criticisms weren't about the black twins or the lesbian witches. They were about the script, the stiff performances, and a story that sometimes felt more like a political essay than a space epic. YouTubers like Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic tore the series apart, racking up millions of views, but their videos focused on the slow pacing and clunky dialogue, not a crusade against diversity. The team had an easy out: blame the audience. It avoids looking at their own missteps. Hedlund herself told the New York Times before the premiere, "If it doesn't succeed, it'll be because of me." When failure came, that introspection vanished, replaced by fingers pointing outward. But if the fans weren't the problem, then who was really pulling the strings behind the curtain? Now that the dust has settled, what's left of The Acolyte? In practical terms, it left a financial crater and a dent in Star Wars' aura as an infallible brand. Future series like Skeleton Crew, which is also struggling with low numbers despite positive reviews, face an uphill battle. Fans are exhausted, split between those who want more experiments and those who just want to return to basics. Jedi, Sith, and epic battles. No frills. But it's not all doom and gloom. The series introduced intriguing characters. Chimere, the charismatic Sith. Vernestra, the stoic Jedi. And a Darth Plagueis cameo that left jaws on the floor. There's talk those stories might live on in comics or novels, like Solo and Crimson Dawn. The High Republic remains fertile ground, and some speculate Disney could salvage The Acolyte in another format, far from the astronomical costs of live action. Others think it's buried too deep. What's next for Star Wars? Andor Season 2 is on the way, and The Mandalorian and Grogu promises to bring Baby Yoda to the big screen. But The Acolyte's bitter aftertaste lingers. Was it an inevitable flop? Or a missed opportunity? That brings us to the big question. The Acolyte didn't fall because of a fan rebellion or a dark conspiracy. It crashed because it couldn't balance its ambition with what fans wanted from Star Wars. A massive budget, a narrative that divided more than it united, and a team that chose to blame the audience rather than learn from their mistakes sealed its fate. Rebecca Henderson can scream on Instagram all she wants, but the numbers, the reviews, and Disney's silence tell the real story. Will the company learn from this stumble, or will we keep seeing pricey experiments fade into obscurity? As the galaxy keeps spinning, one thing's clear. In Star Wars, like in life, trying isn't enough. You've got to hit the mark.